Good evening and welcome to Scotland at 7 here on Broadcasting Scotland. My name is Kenny McBride and I'm joined tonight by Anne McLaughlin, former SNP MP, and Elizabeth Ford, who's a music historian and academic, and we'll be talking to her about her particular situation in a few minutes. But first, we have Brexit. As always, it seems to be the story that never ends. We were in court today at the Supreme Court in London for the second day of the hearing to determine whether or not the Scottish court ruling would be upheld or the English and Irish court rulings would be upheld. Today, Aidan O'Neill spoke rather powerfully, describing Boris Johnson shutting down Parliament, as he said, we have got here the mother of parliaments being shut down by the father of lies, and said to the judges, rather than allowing lies to triumph, listen to the angels of your better nature and rule that this prorogation is unlawful and an abuse of power. So the case does continue. There is expected to be another full day of argument tomorrow, and then the decision should come back on Friday. But Anne, coming to you first, what's your take on the court case and anything that you've heard from the court today?
Well, I mean, I'm obviously no lawyer, although I am now surrounded by people who think they are lawyers because they've been watching this for the last couple of days. It seems to have gripped the nation. So I've even got a friend, I'll give her a shout out, Anne Murray in Yangon in Myanmar, who is off sick just now, so she's watching the Supreme Court proceedings, and everyone's turning into a lawyer. I think Aidan O'Neill was quite, I only saw a little bit of it, but I thought he was quite sensational today. But then he's got right on his side as far as I'm concerned. You know, the arguments he made were the most powerful arguments, and you know, we just have to wait and see what the ruling is, but it's pretty high drama at the moment, isn't it?
It certainly is, and obviously this poses a particular issue because it is this conflict between Scots law and English law, the Scots courts, the English courts, and who actually gets to have a say in what happens in Britain. If the Supreme Court does decide that the Scottish court ruling doesn't apply, then it does say something, I think, more generally about Scotland's place in the Union. Now, I don't know how you would feel about that. We've also had some other news today, of course. In European Parliament, Alan Smith was saying that there is no good Brexit.
He's right.
As he said, Brexit has been a matter of frustration and regret from the very start. And from a Scottish perspective, it's also been a thing of grave injustice. Scotland was told 5 years ago that the only way to stay in the EU was to stick with the UK. Well, how ridiculous that argument looks now. And he's pointing out again that the likelihood of a deal, even with a deal, this is going to be damaging to Scotland, and despite being something that Scotland didn't vote for. Is this had you heard anything from Alan's speech? You know.
Yes, I saw something on
Twitter
about it. Yeah. Alan, when Alan speaks on these things, it tends to spread far and wide, as it should, because, you know, very few people know much more about our relationship with Europe than Alan Smith. So, yeah, it was. It's been, the whole thing though has been quite. It's a long, laborious process that we've had to go through, and it's bad enough going through it when you voted for it, but when you and your country didn't vote for it, to be dragged through it. And I think, you know, there's been a lot of consistent messaging coming out of Scotland in terms of what we want from this and what we don't want from it. But yeah, as things stand at the moment, we're in a really dreadful place that wasn't of our own making, and we seem powerless to get out of it. I mean, those of us that support independence know we're not powerless to get out of it, but it will be difficult, and we just have to persuade the rest of the country to come along with us. It's not something I would have chosen, this entire thing, but nothing says more about our relationship with the United Kingdom than this whole Brexit thing.
And Elizabeth, I mean, as somebody who's not lived your whole life in Britain, you've been here now for, I think you said 8 years?
Yes, it'll be 8 years next week.
Yeah. So how does this look to somebody coming in from the outside, where you can have one part of the country voting one way, one part voting the other way, one court saying one thing, the other court saying the other? It always seems to me as an insider that Britain is quite a strange place. I wonder how strange it looks, all of this Brexit bourrach, to somebody who's got an outsider's perspective.
Well, I think the whole idea of Brexit is complete nonsense. I mean, it's like they're determined to shoot themselves in the foot. Then I think if you take an island made up of 4 little countries, and the second largest of the little countries says, no, we don't want to do that, in a very, very loud way, and you still impose it on them, I think it highlights the whole historic relationship between Scotland and England, which I think could be best compared to an abusive marriage. I think England has been beating up on Scotland since, I don't know, pre-Bannockburn.
Somebody got into a lot of trouble for saying that a few years back. But you can say it as an outsider.
I can say it. I can say it as a historian too.
Yeah, exactly.
And a historian of the 18th century. So, I mean, looking back, it's sort of inevitable that this is the kind of thing that England would impose on Scotland. Mm-hmm. And I also think that, I mean, it's not necessarily that ridiculous, given that I came from a country that managed to vote for Hillary Clinton and elect Donald Trump.
I suppose we've all got our own little quirks in our constitutional arrangements, and the Electoral College is certainly one of the weirder ones.
It's a product of the Enlightenment, which doesn't actually work anymore.
Can I just say something about
Sure.
The rest of the world and how they view this? So I do a lot of work overseas. So I do work in Asia, the Middle East and Africa. And everywhere I go, people want to talk. I mean, I'm working with political activists and politicians. So obviously they're political, but they all want to talk about Brexit. And it's interesting, even, you go back to the hotel and the security guard will say to you, so this Brexit thing, are you British, are you English, and I know I'm Scottish, right? So you voted 62% to remain, and people are really, really aware of it. And I think the reason is because it's so utterly fascinating. It's not fascinating for us, it's terrible, but it's so unusual and almost, it is anti-democratic that people are actually studying it and finding it something. I think historians will, in years to come, will look back and this will be a specialist subject.
Yeah, I mean, I wonder how anybody will be able to trawl through it and not think that it's just some bizarre parody of normal politics. But we have seen as well, some statistics came out today. The chief statistician for Scotland published a report on the second quarter of 2019, which said that we had an economic contraction of 0.3%. So that's not a good sign. Suggestions from the SNP, amongst other, and the Scottish Government, that this is a result of Brexit. It's a lack of confidence in the economy. People are unsure how to plan ahead. There's just less confidence, less willingness to spend money, and obviously the ongoing impact of austerity that's left a lot of people without a lot of money in their pockets. I mean, I don't know, how are you guys feeling about the state of the economy just now? Do you feel that that's something that is noticed on the ground?
I think it's going to be very sharply noticed soon. But yeah, it's noticed in terms of, you talked about investment, and so recently, in fact at the weekend, I was speaking to some friends who have a printing business. They're Polish, and they were saying, for 2 reasons: one, because they don't know what impact Brexit's going to have, and 2, because they don't know if after 15 years they are going to be able to, they're just not sure. So they don't have their settled status yet. So they've stopped investing, they've stopped developing, and they're not doing anything different to generate income. until they know, until everything's clear. And they've been saying that for a while, but nothing does become clear. So I think that's going to be replicated across the country. But the worst thing for me in terms of the Yellowhammer report that came out was the one line with nothing to say how they were going to tackle this, that said that those on low incomes, I can't remember how they worded it, but those on low incomes were going to be disproportionately affected by Brexit. Of course they are, but those on low incomes cannot afford to be any more affected by austerity, and I'm really, really worried about it.
Yeah, I saw some coverage today about threat to the food supply, and that the government really doesn't have a food strategy post-Brexit. They have a fuel plan to make sure that there's still petrol available, but there's no food plan at the moment. So anyway, you did mention there as well the issue of people seeking settled status, and obviously for a lot of our European Scots, this has been a very, very challenging period. But Elizabeth, I'd like to come to you now.
Okay.
You've been in the news a wee bit. You were in the Guardian yesterday. You've been in the National, I think you said twice already?
3 times.
3 times already.
3 times.
So some of our viewers will certainly know a little bit about your story, but well, I guess just start at the beginning. What was it that brought you to Scotland in the first place?
I came to Scotland in the end of September 2011 to start a PhD in 18th century Scottish music at the University of Glasgow.
Okay, and you've been here for 8 years. You got your PhD, and you've done very well for yourself. I mean, without wanting to blow your trumpet, your own trumpet too much. You're published. You've been offered research fellowships in Oxford and at Edinburgh. Is that right?
Yeah, I was the fellow in 18th century Scottish Studies at the Institute for Advanced Study at Edinburgh the last academic year.
Yeah.
I recreated a historic pub in virtual reality.
Oh wow!
Yeah.
Really?
I'm going to have to see that after the show. So you've obviously contributed a great deal. You're one of the leading experts in 18th century Scottish music. Is that
Yes.
right? Yeah. So you've come here and obviously contributed greatly to our own understanding of ourselves, which is a wonderful contribution to make. But now you're facing deportation potentially.
Potentially.
So can you give us a wee bit of background on how you got to this point that you're at now?
Yes. So since they changed the student visas so that you don't actually have time to find a job, they make you apply for something called a doctoral extension visa, which gives you another year. Now, it's really unusual, though, to graduate with a PhD and then get a full-time job that pays £30,000. Like, it doesn't happen. So, while I had that visa, I received Royal Society of Edinburgh funding to be part of a project at Glasgow. So in order to do that, I applied for a charity worker's visa. I have a friend who runs a charity, and she said, I can sponsor your visa. So we did that. The trouble with the charity worker's visa is that you're not actually allowed to earn money.
Okay.
Right. But I was allowed to be here and do research, and you can get paid in stipends. You can't be anybody's employee.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Following that, I had the fellowship at Edinburgh, and I renewed my visa. And then this year, I applied for a Leverhulme Foundation postdoc through Edinburgh, and I was in the top 150 candidates, and they took 140. That would have gotten me, though, the coveted Tier 2 visa. Yeah. So, but I had the fellowship at the Bodleian, which is a 2-month visiting research position to do Scottish music at the Bodleian. And I thought, well, the thing that makes the most sense then, since I didn't get the postdoc, is to just extend the visa that I already have. It works. It's not that big of a hassle. You click the button on the website, you're good to go. I did all that. I was in Edinburgh representing Glasgow and Edinburgh at the International Congress on 18th Century Studies on July the 18th, a date which is seared in my memory. And I got the email from the Home Office saying my application had been refused because leave to remain had previously been granted in error. And I had 14 days to get out of the country or figure out a solution.
Okay. So what was the error that they claimed had been made?
Apparently, the charity workers visa is capped at 12 months total.
Okay.
So if you go to the website and it says, are you in the country? You click yes. And it says, click here to extend your visa in the country. And it says visas can be extended for up to 12 months.
Mm-hmm.
Which sounds like you can extend it for a year at a time.
Mm-hmm.
Uh-huh.
What they mean is there's a 12-month cap on it total.
Oh.
So if it's originally issued for 7 months, you can then extend it for an additional 5, but you can't have more than 12.
I see.
So they were saying that I had already gotten a year that I shouldn't have had, therefore they were not going to grant me another year.
Okay.
So within 14 days, I could apply for administrative review, which would make them go back and reconsider their decision. I could get out of the country, or I could apply for a different type of visa.
Okay. So what is your plan at this stage then?
Well, the application for administrative review was declined. So my lawyer presented me with 3 options. The first one was a judicial review, which would involve an advocate taking the case, and that could take anywhere from 6 months to a year, and would kind of leave me here in limbo.
Yeah.
And he's not terribly confident that that would work.
And not able to earn.
Not
in
able
that
to earn.
time.
I can't leave the country either.
Yeah.
I'm just here.
And am I right in thinking no access to any public funds?
I don't think so.
Mm.
I don't think so. The second choice is I can apply on human rights grounds.
Okay.
Now, that one has potential in that I have a great deal of public support,
Mm-hmm.
and he can argue that I've lived here for 8 years, so I'm fully integrated into society, have a cat, do stuff. I've written 3 books on Scottish music history. But the trouble with that is that if he cannot get me a fee waiver, it would cost in excess of £2,000,
Mm-hmm.
and it could again take nearly a year to do, in which I'm stuck here in limbo,
limbo.
not able to support myself. The option, which doesn't stink, is leave the country, apply for endorsement to the British Academy for a Tier 1 Special Talent, Special Promise visa. And that is the option I'm probably going to do,
Okay.
because, well, I think it just seems like less hassle.
Yeah.
And less time sitting around waiting for something to happen. I mean, there's a great deal of momentum, which could certainly, I think everyone's pretty fired up about how dumb this is, how utterly pointless. But at the end of the day, what am I going to do for nearly a year with no access to money and not able to leave?
Yeah. Would you even be able to work during that year? Would you?
No, I can't get paid.
Yeah, you can't.
I can't
you
get paid.
can't
I
do
mean,
that.
I can't even go. You would think, okay, so I need to go do this thing at Oxford. I can't even do that because they won't give me my stipend if I don't have a visa.
Yeah.
And this is not that unusual.
No.
It's horrendous, but it's not that unusual. So you've got lots of people who have limited leave to remain because they don't give out indefinite leave to remain to many people. So they have limited leave to remain, and when they go to renew in plenty of time, the Home Office just take forever to do it. And I used to have people when I was an MP coming to me and saying, right, I remember one, I'm a pharmacist. My husband's a doctor, and we now don't have leave to remain, and we're having to stop work, and we've got children, and we've got a mortgage to pay, or rent to pay, or whatever it was. What are we supposed to do? And it took them nearly a year to get that renewed. But they were not the only ones. This happens a lot, and I can't help but thinking that it's done deliberately.
I think it is. Oh, I think it is, yeah. I think it's a question of people pressing buttons and not using their critical thinking skills, but pressing buttons. And also, and when I spoke to my MP's office, there was a great deal of they have to meet quotas or they get chewed out. So I think I'm a quota.
Yeah, you did mention a fairly disturbing marker that you'd heard about.
Yes,
being
I've
used.
heard that in some of the Home offices, that if you've approved too many visas, if you've let too many people into the country, they put a little black monkey on your desk that has to sit there.
Oh, so years ago, I'd heard it was a cabbage, and the cabbage sat on your desk
Oh.
all day, I don't know if that's true.
Honestly, I mean, if
I'd believe it.
either of them is
So,
bad, the black
yeah.
monkey I think seems a little more horrifying.
Yeah.
Well,
Yes, actually.
more obviously racist, but less smelly.
Well, there is
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
Although you can snack on the cabbage.
Depends which one bothers you more, I
I know.
suppose. I mean, we have heard a lot. We've talked a lot on this show previously about Lizanne Zeitzman, who had been running a cafe in Arran with her husband, and then was told she would have to leave the country because they weren't earning enough, despite having invested. They got her visa initially because they had inherited money, which meant they had enough to support themselves. But then they invested that money in a business to support local businesses, generate jobs, generate
Oh, you
income.
don't want to do that, do you?
And it's that's what's hurt them. And I think when I hear about your case, it's another case where you're exactly the sort of person that we would want.
I am.
Sorry. But highly intelligent, productive, and really contributing to our knowledge economy. A leading researcher, somebody who's come to study us as well. It's not even like you're just using this as a base to study somewhere else. You've come to help us understand Scotland.
Exactly.
And like with Lizanne, who's created a local business and is supporting businesses in an area that's struggling. You're exactly the kind of people that anybody, if you asked any of these politicians who they wanted to come to Britain, you're the kind of people that they would say, and yet you're the people that we see getting removed. I mean, God knows what it's like for the people who maybe don't have your intellect and your ability to get your story out there, because we have heard countless stories from this hostile environment of what's happening to people. And as you were an MP for 2 years?
2 years and 1 month.
2 years and a month. And I mean, presumably you heard cases like this. What was the feeling that you got in Westminster and Whitehall about these kind of cases? Was there any sort of sympathy from the government benches?
No, none at all.
That was a short answer.
Okay, why not?
Yeah, so I actually sat on the immigration bill committee. It was quite intensive. It was something like 16 full days of consideration of this bill. And I was quite shocked. And I speak as somebody who, prior to being elected, I was in the Scottish Parliament for 2 years previously. And from then, and in between times, I'd had a lot of contact with asylum seekers, with other migrants. So I was very well aware of what the environment was like. But I was really quite shocked by the attitude of some of the Conservative MPs on that committee. And I discovered that, with a few notable exceptions, and there were some notable exceptions, and they're all, you can read about it in the debates and everything. Some Tories who spoke up for migrants and spoke about the contribution that people like yourself make to our countries. With a few notable exceptions, most really didn't care, and they were quite hostile themselves.
So what are what's your immediate situation? You're due to leave by next Friday, was that you said?
That's my current understanding.
Yeah. So
There's been a bit of back and forth with my lawyer. I mean, he has, as of yesterday, he told me that I had 30 days, which would be up next Friday, and that the immigration minister has been notified about this, and we're waiting for a response from him on some minutiae. Like, can I actually, because you can switch into a Tier 1 visa from a different type of Tier 5.
okay.
So we're trying to find out, can I not just switch into it from the Tier 5 that I've had? But we've been waiting nearly a month for the response.
That would be a bit too straightforward for the Home Office.
That's what I'm afraid of. I have no faith in the Home
But
Office
fingers
at
crossed,
all.
fingers
I have no
crossed,
faith
but-
in them. So if I'm here past Friday, technically I will have overstayed, which could possibly, not necessarily, but possibly, have a negative impact on any future applications. And I don't want that. I
Yeah.
very much do not want that. I mean, And I'm concerned enough about this that, I mean, I'm even looking into shipping my accumulated books and whatnot home. Because this might not work either.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And of course,
that's really tricky.
but then on the other side of that, you know, if you're out of the country, it becomes a lot easier to not let you back in.
Exactly.
Exactly. It's a pretty horrible situation to be in. Is there anything that our viewers can do to help? Is there somebody they could write to, or a petition they can sign, or anything like that?
Yeah, they could certainly contact their MPs as well as mine, who is Stuart McDonald.
Okay.
For the South Side. That's Stuart McDonald.
That's Stuart McDonald.
That's Stuart McDonald, not the other one. I was actually confused at first that there were two of them.
Stuart.
Yes,
Stuart.
When I needed to find him, I went to the wrong one.
Who is actually the immigration spokesperson, the wrong one.
It was actually
was handy.
right.
Yeah.
I went to Ian Blackford as well.
Right.
And he set me straight on who was who. And I would be mad as hell and stay fired up and do whatever you can to try and get away from England and try and get sensible immigration for Scotland.
Well, that sounds like...
I look forward to coming back to a free and independent Scotland.
Well, I think I speak for all of us and for all of our viewers that we would absolutely love it if you can stay, and you will definitely be welcome back in
But
independent
don't
Scotland.
think badly of me if I leave on Friday, because
No.
I don't want to be arrested, nor do I want to be poor for nearly a year.
It is an incredibly difficult position to put anybody in. I mean, you've been here for 8 years, but still you don't have family here. You don't have that kind of support network that could support you.
I have work colleagues.
Yeah, who I'm sure are all lovely, but
but they can't give me a job.
They can't give you a job. They can't keep you for a year while you go through this whole process.
I've had plenty say if it were that easy to get a job, I would have one.
Yeah.
But,
It's a tragedy that there are so few jobs for 18th century music historians. I've often said that.
I'm sure you say that every day.
We are going to move on now. I hope. I mean, there's a lot more I'm sure that we could talk about, but we do have some other stories to touch on. So we have a little bit of good news from the Scottish Government. The Social Security Agency in Scotland continues to offer new things. This is the new job start payment. It's a new payment to help young people with the cost of starting a job. So this would be £250 or £400 for people who have children to help with travel, clothing, lunches, or other costs associated with work. And Shirley-Ann Somerville, the Social Security Secretary, said that up to in the first year, about 5,000 young people should benefit from this support. And having been somebody who has spent a lot of time temping in my life, I cannot tell you how important this is. The cost of starting work is a real nightmare at times, and just being able to get yourself to work until your first paycheck comes in is a real trial for a lot of people. And if you're on a very, very tight income, it can be the difference between feeding your kids and not. I know somebody who that happened to, who was really struggling, really on the edge, just trying to better themselves and get a job. So how do you feel generally, Anne, about what the Scottish Government has been doing with the new social security system in Scotland?
See, every time I read anything about our new social security system in Scotland, I just think it's a weird thing to say. I love the Scottish Government. One of my biggest bugbears in life, and bugbear is probably an understatement, is the attitude towards people who need a bit of help because they're out of work. It really irritates me. So, and the DWP is all about punishing people and testing people and making them jump through hoops and treating them disrespectfully, and politicians speak about them in a way that, and the media, they're scroungers, they're, work shy. So I've been unemployed, I've been long-term unemployed, never, and now anybody who knows me now will say that, every single job I've ever had has taken up almost all of my waking time, and the common denominator is me, because I just am really hard working. So I used to have to hear people talk about work shy unemployed people when I was unemployed, and it's desperate. But so the first thing for me is that our social security system, our Shirley Ann Somerville and Jean Freeman before her were very, very clear to say, you know, we're going to treat people with respect. And this is, you know, something that is available to everybody at a time when they need it. So that's great. This particular thing that you're talking about, the £250, what did you call it? Job Start?
Job Start payment.
Perfect. It's perfect because, as you said, you know, it is really difficult. I mean, some people have... I worked as a welfare rights advisor in the 80s in the Gorbals, and I remember a guy coming in, and Thatcher was in charge then, and so life was not good.
No.
And I remember a guy coming in and saying that he had walked to Greenock, which is 25 miles away, walked to Greenock because there was a guy taking on people in the yards there, and he was desperate for a job. He had a young baby and a wife, and he'd walked 3 times, hadn't finished that, he'd walked 3 times to catch up with this guy who finally offered him a job. But he needed safety boots, and this guy wasn't offering safety boots, and he went to sign off and said, you know, can I get some help? No, I mean, things, you know, change over the years, but can I get some help? He couldn't take the job in the end. We did everything we could to try and get him the safety boots and the safety jacket, but he also needed money. He couldn't walk to work every day, obviously. No. So there's somebody that needed something a little bit more, and there was no help, and he didn't get the job, so he remained unemployed. Now, I don't know that this happened, but I heard that he didn't come back to us. He then had a lot of grief from the it wasn't the DWP at the time, but whatever they were called, because he turned down a job. And this is the sort of thing that happens to people all the time. And that was the 80s, but now when you've got benefit sanctions and everything, I think it's even worse. So this different mood music, different attitude, and actually practical help when you really need it, it's fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, that guy, if he's prepared to walk to Greenock to get a job, he's clearly not a skiver. No, you know, he's clearly somebody that wants to work.
It's awful.
And I mean, I had a somewhat similar experience, not quite as intense as that, but this would have been probably 10 years or so ago. I'd been temping. I'd had a relatively long period out. I'd been out for maybe 3 or 4 months. And when I went to get a new job, I went to the job centre and I said, look, you know, I've just come to the end of my money. I'm starting work tomorrow. Like, is there anything you can do to help with my bus fares? Because it's going to cost me quite a bit to get there. I think this was when I was working out in Coatbridge. I said, is there anything you can do to help? This would have been in the June, I think. And they said, oh no, that budget for the year is spent already. And I mean, I was quite taken aback. I really couldn't believe that was the answer. But it's something that I think affects probably more people than we realise. People who, as you say, have to turn down jobs or just not look for certain types of jobs because they know that they just can't afford to take the job.
And it's not easy to say to your friends and family, you know, there were times when a long time ago when I was unemployed and I had holes in the bottom of my shoes, and when my mum found out, she was really annoyed that I hadn't come to her. But nobody wants to go and say, Mum, I'm an adult, but I need your help again, or tell their friends. So, you know, how many people are, you know, going to come to you and say, listen, I can't even afford the bus fare to work for this new job. People just find that really difficult to do. So it's great that they're getting a wee bit of dignity back. They don't have to do that because they can apply for this grant.
And thankfully all that does come on top of the benefits that are still controlled from Westminster. So it is one of the clearest examples, I think, of the Scottish Government doing something very specific that will make a difference in a lot of lives. Also today was announced the new Homelessness Prevention Fund. This is £1.5 million from the Scottish Government to support housing associations and social landlords to prevent crisis, basically, to stop families from becoming homeless. The money will support families through accessible financial advice to reduce household costs, employment support, and in emergency situations it can even be paid directly to families to make up any shortfall in their rent. Kevin Stewart, the Housing Minister, said, "We want to eradicate homelessness for good, and we recognise the important role of social landlords in helping us to achieve this, especially through the preventative measures this fund can help with. Housing associations offer so much more than places for people to live. They support tenants through a range of services, from financial and employment advice to linking up with health and social care. This fund is an important step forward in joining up services and making sure that everyone in Scotland has a safe, warm place to call home." So this is another piece of quite good news, I think. It's good to see Scotland again taking something of a lead on homelessness. I don't know, do either of you have experience with either homelessness or with kind of these issues? No?
I can say something. I
Absolutely.
just want to let you say
No,
it.
I have no experience with homelessness, although I do like that they're trying to help people be able to get to work and be able to do the things that you need. Acknowledge that getting to work and starting a new job is expensive.
Mm. It doesn't make sense not to do it.
It doesn't, does it? Like you need clothes, you need transportation, you need to be able to get up in the morning. Yeah.
And this new fund for the prevention of homelessness, I like the word prevention. Prevention is better than cure. And I think there needs to be, I think there needs to be more of it. It's kind of difficult when you've got limited funds, though. You know, do you mop up or do you put most of your money into preventing it in the first place? I mean, I suppose all I would say on homelessness is that there are so many really interesting strategies around at the moment, like the Housing First strategy, and it all sounds great. And for some people it's working really well, but there are some people it's just not working for. And that can be for a multitude of reasons. So there are some people who are going to fall through the net anyway. When I was elected, people who were entitled to be housed were being told that they weren't entitled to be housed when they were. So and then they don't always come to their MP. So my intention had been to go to where they're referred to and skulk with a member of staff and talk to people when they come out and say, what were you told? What's your circumstances? Right, actually, here's the correct information. I lost my seat, so so that plan went by the wayside. But I think things have got better. But and with money going into the prevention end of it, then it should. But I think a lot of the stuff that's going on at the moment is really good. It's just going to take a while for it to really have an impact.
Yeah, I mean, I get the feeling that with a lot of these things, with the benefits system, with immigration, even with housing to some extent, there's this hostile environment concept has become a real driving force of a lot of ways that government works, where the goal seems to be make things as difficult as possible for people. Not because there is some particular need to make it complex and difficult, but just so that people are discouraged from fighting back.
Oh,
just
absolutely.
to keep you in your place.
Absolutely. I think too, people perceive, at least the English, as being so civilized and polite. But when it comes down to it, there's nothing nice about it. Well, it is very much about keeping everybody poor or out.
If you don't mind, I wouldn't mind just defending the English there,
Okay,
because
right.
I think what you mean is the British government.
And that is what I mean. That's what I mean. I think specifically what I mean is the British government, but I think the perception is English people.
Yeah,
that's
and
true.
I think that gets into the sort of snake's pit of Englishness and Britishness.
But there is, I mean, it is worth mentioning that there are so many English people who are members of the SNP, and many English people in England who struggle with this system as much as we do. And it's, you know, my sister, for instance, her and her husband are Green Party activists down there. He's totally against independence, but he's not against, you know, a lot of the good things that we would support again.
Of course, no.
But Yeah. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think as you say, there is this kind of international image of English people as very kind of polite and thoughtful and careful and pragmatic.
Correct.
And I think the last 10 years of Tory government has that bit from all of this hostile environment stuff to Brexit. I think they've really shocked a lot of the world. I've got a number of friends in Europe who have all said, what happened to you people? You used to be sensible. So yeah, it's a pretty crazy thing that the world is finally seeing that a lot of us in the independence movement have been saying for a long time.
So the Tory British government is basically smearing the reputation of decent people across, you know, the four countries of the United Kingdom, and in particular the English, and it's not right.
Now, just quite quickly, would like to just mention what's happened in the Israeli elections. I don't know how closely either of you have been following this, but with more than 90% of the votes counted, Benny Gantz's Blue and White Party have 32 seats, while Likud, which is led by the current Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, has 31. Both have said that they expect to lead Israel's next government, but they're going to need to form alliances with some of the smaller parties to make that happen. Netanyahu has said that he absolutely wants to remain in power. He expects to remain in power.
Of course he does.
And he is going to do that by forging alliances with some of the religious politicians and some of the far-right ultra nationalists, the kind of extreme Zionist factions. As I say, I don't know how much either of you know about Israeli politics, but this feeling that there are two major parties in Israel now saying that they intend to annex part of the West Bank. They intend to take stronger and stronger action against the Arab minority. The Netanyahu has talked about Arabs as a kind of fifth column seeking to destroy Israel from inside. What do we make of this kind of rising, quite extreme right and sometimes extreme Zionist opinion in Israel? Is this too touchy a topic for anyone to touch?
No, I mean, I don't know a great deal about it. I'd be delighted to see the back of Netanyahu, but my knowledge of Israel and Israeli politics is really what they do to Palestine, basically. And I'm not holding out much hope for any kind of resolution to that anytime soon. Of course, if the rest of the world could just open their eyes to it a little bit, or open their mouths even, then maybe we would. But I don't know. I just find the whole thing really depressing.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's one of the challenges, isn't it? Is that Trump has basically given Netanyahu the green light to take on this extreme posture. Do you have friends in the States who talk about any of this stuff?
My dad has 2 Jewish law partners.
Okay.
Well, I mean, I think this idea that Israel can do no wrong is quite troubling, as is the idea that the United States can just intervene, decide where the capital is going to be. It's all very troubling. The idea that they're also sanctioning you can go annex a different part of the country, but this is also coming from a man who thought he could buy a country that's not for sale. Yeah. Beyond that, I mean, yes, I think it's part of a worldwide right-wing movement, and that is what, for whatever reason, seems to have momentum all over the world right now.
Yeah.
Except I think I'm quite hopeful, actually. I think it will be arrested, and I think it's pretty good that, to my mind, these islands are standing up to Boris Johnson and what he's doing. So I thought when he came in, I thought, him and Donald Trump and everybody else, and I thought, oh, we're doomed. But in actual fact, because I felt that Donald Trump was accepted too readily, and it was everything he started to say was just seemed to be normal. It was normalised, but that's not happening with Boris Johnson. So I've got a little bit of hope for the world.
It is encouraging that Boris Johnson has not gone down as quickly and as easily as Trump went down.
Yeah. So we're now, the First Minister today was in Berlin, actually building international relationships, which is something that we haven't seen much of from the British government recently. The First Minister was given an award for her services to internationalism. She was highlighted that engagement with EU nations in the run-up to a possible Brexit date is vital for the Scottish economy and society to show that Scotland is open. And of course this comes on the day of the 5th anniversary of the independence referendum. And today Ian Blackford and quite a substantial group from YSI, Young Scots for Independence, were in Glasgow to speak to people on the street and also to speak to us, and we do have a wee short video to show you. Obviously today we're looking back a wee bit, and looking back on the 2014 campaign, how do you feel it went, and how do you feel Scotland has changed as a result?
But I think what you've seen is that young people in particular were really energised in that campaign, not just in 2014, but that's reflected in the turnout that we've had from young people today. This is unfinished business. And I think perhaps more importantly, the risks that we face today are huge. Risks have been taken out of the European Union. The rights that we have as EU citizens that we're going to be denied if Boris Johnson gets his way. The threats that there are to our economy, the potential loss of 100,000 jobs in Scotland. So I think it is absolutely now crystal clear that independence offers us the opportunity to protect Scotland's economic interests, not just economically but socially and culturally. That need, that desire for independence is ever stronger than perhaps it was in 2014. So there's an obligation that we've got to give leadership to that campaign. That's what Nicola Sturgeon as our First Minister has been doing. We know that we have to send a very strong message to Westminster in any election that comes over the coming weeks, that it's the people of Scotland that must determine their own future. It will be the people of Scotland that will do that, not Boris Johnson. And that's why we need to make sure in the election campaign we send as many SNP MPs to Westminster as possible. That will unlock the door on a Section 30, and then let's begin that debate as to what Scotland's future should be. Let's have a debate about the vision and values that we all have. How do we deliver a fairer Scotland? How do we deal with the inequality? How do we deal with the poverty? How do we make sure that we deliver sustainable economic growth, but at the same time take our climate change responsibilities as well? There is a bright and there's a better future for Scotland if we grasp the opportunity, and if I may say so, we complete the journey that Scotland started to independence when our Parliament came back in 1999. Now is the time for the people of Scotland to recognise that our Parliament has delivered. We've got a Parliament that's focused on the day job, and that's in sharp contrast to the chaos of Westminster.
So what would you say are the biggest changes that you've seen in the independence movement over that time, including, I guess, what message the independence movement is putting out?
I think we've got to be reflective, and I think we've got to understand the opinions of everybody. We've got to reach out in a spirit of friendship. It has to be one where we listen to what people have to say. There have been many, many people that have gone on a journey over the course of the last few years from no to yes. We must encourage them to do so. Many of them are doing that at their own pace, and we should respect that. But it's one where we need to have respectful debate, where we can have that honest and open dialogue about how we do deliver that fairer Scotland. I think it is the case in 2014 that a number of people were perhaps frightened. They weren't quite ready to finish that journey. Let's make sure that we give them the time, the space, the opportunity, and crucially, the encouragement that they can do that and they can come with us.
And as we look forward, what would you say are the main things that independence supporters should be thinking about doing now?
Well, I think what we've got to do is build the momentum which is there. I mean, the polls have shown that there's increasing support for independence, not just support for independence, but people want that referendum. So we need to get out and we need to talk to people on the doorsteps, town by town, community by community. Let's make sure that we're building that support for independence, that momentum grows and this becomes unstoppable.
Ian Blackford, thanks very much. So, yeah, it's been quite a 5 years, I think. It's been quite a lot of things have happened. Looking back on 2014, what are your memories of that time?
Well, so I was a Yes Scotland coordinator for Glasgow Provan, and I also trained people in the Yes Scotland offices in how to speak to people about independence, and I was involved with Africans for an Independent Scotland as well. So I had quite a busy life at that point. 2014 was an amazing year. It was, it felt like there was just a real buzz about the country. It was mainly positive. A few wee spots of bother when people, were quite angry at you for daring to believe that you could be independent. But on the whole, across the country, we were running just incredible campaigns, and people were starting to talk about politics in a way that they never had before. So they were reading about politics. I mean, I had people who were saying to me, Hen, I'm nearly 80, but I thought I better go and read up on this independence thing because I've got to vote in it. And I've never been interested in politics. I had, people who said to me they'd never read a book in their lives, but they realised that they had to make the right decision. So you can't say people didn't think about it. They certainly did think about it. And I think we've got that legacy of people, still quite politically engaged and interested in what we could achieve as an independent country.
Yeah, I mean, generally things like turnout have been up in Scotland since 2014 relative to how they've been in the rest of the UK. So that is one big lasting legacy. And Elizabeth, again, as somebody who didn't grow up with all of this this stuff. I mean, I grew up in a pro SNP household. My dad was a member and stood for council and stuff. So I was always aware of the arguments. But as somebody coming to Scotland probably at a time when it wasn't really very high on the agenda, and then to be suddenly finding yourself in the midst of this huge political discussion, what was your experience back in 2014?
Well, it's something like I woke up one day and realized that Scottish independence had become a thing. I thought, well, okay, what did I miss the last couple of years? And I think I exist very much in a pro-independence bubble. I just do for whatever reason. I've only encountered a few people who did not vote yes, but then my experience is not vast. I actually had to be convinced of the argument, but the more I thought about it and the more I saw what it could be, I thought, there's a great sense of hope and potential. I mean, I thought it could indeed, especially at the start, be difficult, but there's so much potential. And my mom was over around this time. She was here for the referendum. I remember she was wearing her yes badge. She was going up to vote no people on the street and saying, why not? So
I love your mom.
A pushy American lady going up to them and saying, don't you understand that this is a fantastic opportunity to decide a future as part of a democratic process, rather than through a potentially bloody conflict like in most countries. Yeah. And she was urging, my mom was urging everyone to take risks. And I remember the sense of great despair the next day.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well.
Yeah, it was not a nice morning the next day, no. I have to say. I mean, the hangover probably didn't help much, but
that just made it even more grim.
But it was a pretty grim morning. I had been convinced from a year beforehand. I had said to everybody it's going to be well over 80% turnout and we're going to win 60-40. And people looked at me like I was crazy. They said, there's no way the turnout will be that high. So at least I was right about that. But I was so optimistic. I remember on the day I got a thing on my Facebook today, your memories.
Yeah.
No.
And I was like, oh God, look how optimistic I was. But it was a lovely day. I had met Lady Alba on the way to... she had been going into the polling station at the same time as me, and I'd got into a wee blether with her, and she was off to go around the city performing everywhere. And then I got to our stand at outside Partick train station, and just everybody was buzzing. And we had Wayne's running up to the table and grabbing balloons and badges, and we'd get the big helium canister, so I was blowing up balloons all day. and I got given a Yes T-shirt that I'd not been able to afford up until that point. And it was just that feeling of such optimism. I was so convinced that people would go into the voting booth and wouldn't be able to say no.
But you were right in Glasgow.
In Glasgow it turns out I was right. But the rest of the country, I think I think a lot of us that were in Glasgow really didn't know what the rest of the country was doing.
Except for Dundee.
Well, that's true. That's true. Dundee and most North Lanarkshire and almost Inverclyde. So yeah, it was that day was so optimistic, and I find that the last 5 years have always just felt like slightly disappointing. Since then, I think
slightly.
And of course, we should point out as well, Broadcasting Scotland was born out of the independence referendum. Referendum TV was our producer Linda set up just through the festival in Edinburgh originally, I believe, and it's carried on, and we're now still doing this. We had covered the count live. I think we had people in most of the count centres, and we just there's so much that has come out of the independence referendum that's still going. Women for Independence, for example,
I am a national committee member.
Gone on to do many great things, including things on prison reform, which was a really big moment, I felt, for this organisation that had been set up for one purpose, and then said, but actually, there's a lot of things that women need that don't need independence. So we've had that. We've had, as I say, like Broadcasting Scotland, Indie Live Radio. There's all kinds of things that came out of this, and I think it is good to be able to reflect back and just remember what we have achieved. Sometimes when we look at the Brexit mess and we look at the state of British politics, it's quite easy to feel quite downhearted. But from absolutely nothing, from having no infrastructure at all, we created a whole movement with media and campaigners and different groups of campaigners with different takes on things. We started, as you said, talking about politics in a whole different way. We started having this vision of what a country Scotland could be, and I'm really glad that some of that is still with us, that some of that does stay with us, that as you said, turnouts has stayed up, that engagement has stayed up. And even when we are faced with some of this absolute nightmare, there is still that light at the end of the tunnel. That there is a way that we can get there.
And can I tell you, on Monday afternoon, I was out canvassing, and the fourth question that we always ask, SNP canvassing, but the fourth question we ask is, should Scotland be an independent country? And the first woman I went to, she said, Aye, well, it kind of has to be now. And I said, right. I said, is that a positive thing? And she said, oh, I don't mean it's negative. She said, but I just didn't know what to do last time, so I never voted. She says, but everybody's voting yes this time, aren't they? I thought, oh, take me with me. And then the next woman said that she didn't believe in independence and she didn't like the SNP, but went on to tell me how much she loved Ian Blackford and the way he stood up for Scotland. And then she started to make the argument for independence, and I said, oh, you sound like me. And she started listening to herself and realised it, and she got quite taken aback by that. But I think there is a real difference now, because I think people didn't want to think about it a lot of the time before, and it was just at the end they were like, right, I better work out what I'm doing. But now I think people are politically engaged. They're used to asking questions of politicians and activists, and I just think it's very different, and I have no doubt we will win, not just in Provan where we get 57%. Yes,
that's all down to you, isn't it?
Yeah, all
just
down
you single-handed.
Provan people will be mad at me. No, it's all down to them. Stop it. But I'm absolutely certain we'll win next time. I have no doubt about that.
I do certainly hope so. Unfortunately, we are out of time. We've actually gone over time. We did start fractionally late today though, so I think we'll get away with it. And it's a special occasion. It's 5th birthday, so there we go. Just before we go, I would like to remind you all that producing TV programs is an expensive business. As I say, we have been doing this for over 5 years now, consistently producing regular shows. It is an expensive business though, just keeping the lights on here. So you can see at the bottom of your screen there, become a Broadcasting Scotland supporter, sign up at broadcastingscotland.scot/register. Your £5 a month makes all the difference. And as we've said several times to you, if we get 300 more subscribers over the next, relatively short period, we are ready to go with our new Scottish Question Time show. That's going to be touring the country. And if we have an election, if we have another European referendum, or if we get the Scottish referendum that we're all so desperate for, then we are going to want to have a show like that where we can actually hold our politicians to account. So do please, if you can afford it, go to broadcastingscotland.scot/register and sign up as a supporter. But all that remains for me then is to thank Anne McLaughlin for joining us, and to thank Elizabeth as well for not just for joining us on the show, but for joining us in our country. And we hope that whatever happens, you are able to stay with us for as long as you want to. I don't think there's anybody in this building that would disagree with you. With that.
Thank you.
We really would like you to stay, and we hope that whatever happens, you will at least keep us updated on what happens. I'm sure our viewers will want to know. Yeah. So, in the meantime, thank you, Anne, thank you, Elizabeth, and thank you all of you for joining us. I've been Kenny McBride. This has been Scotland at 7 on Broadcasting Scotland. Good night.